Even if people can't hear you, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, okay. Okay, so Hare Krishna, everybody. This is trial and error, an experiment that we're taking place now, because it's the first time that I think it's the first time we've done it. It's certainly the first time that I've done this with this particular app. I even forget the name of it now. It was just Sarumi Sarumi is my tech guru, so she has just instructed me to do the different things. So, assuming there's people tuning in, hopefully you can see and hear. And this is our Dublin Sunday program, Sunday Feast, and obviously I think it's the first one. I think last week, I wasn't here last week, but I think we had a regular Sunday Feast last week, if I'm correct. So I think this is the first time that we've done it virtual. Obviously, many times with Sunday programs, we have them recorded and they're put out online, but still there's a live audience in the room, etc. So that's not happening today, and I don't have an audience. So as I say, it's kind of trial and error, but I hope all goes well. So as with all of our Sunday programs, and indeed every program that we ever conduct really, there are one component that is always present is the chanting of Hare Krishna. So although I won't be able to hear you chanting, I sincerely hope that you all do chant at home along with me. Thank you very much. So here we go. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everybody. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Jai Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtan Ki Jai. So, Hare Krishna everybody. As I say, this is a little bit of a new experience, so I hope it works out okay. While I was chanting there, I was getting a little bit of a cough, believe it or not, which is very, I guess, well, it's the subject of the day, of the week, of the month, maybe of the year. The issue that's facing society at the moment, indeed the whole world, it would seem, is affected by the situation that we're in. And I wanted, this is a quote that I read actually at Gopanim, but I just want to read it again. It's quite amazing, really. There's very little in terms of subject matter. There's very little subjects that Srila Prabhupada hasn't given some instruction on or some commentary on. So let me just read this again. This is a lecture, a talk that Srila Prabhupada gave in Sriram Mayapur, West Bengal, India, on the 20th of June, 1973. And he says, in Calcutta, there was a very virulent type of plague epidemic in 1898. So what are we talking? We're talking 122 years ago. 122 years ago. So back to the quote. So Calcutta became devastated. All people practically left Calcutta. Daily, hundreds and hundreds of people were dying. I was 1 year old or 1.5 years old. So one Babaji, he organized Sankirtan, Hare Krishna Sankirtan all over Calcutta. And in the Sankirtan, all people, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Parsi, everyone joined. And they were going road to road, street to street, entering in every house. So the plague subsided. This is a fact. Everyone who knows history of Calcutta knows that the plague was subsided by the Sankirtan movement. And that's the end of the quote. When I read that quote, I went to Mr. Google, as we call him or her, Mr. or Mrs. Google, and I just Googled about that, went to Wikipedia, I think, about that plague in 1898. I had actually heard about it before, but I didn't know so much about it. And when I went there and was checking it out, I think in excess of 10 million people actually died as a result of that epidemic, that plague. So while we have full faith that chanting of the holy name can solve every single problem, the sooner it acts and the sooner we're able to focus on that, the better for us and the better for all of society. So yeah, these are very challenging times, as I say, for society in general. And you know, our hearts go out to all people at a time like this. A devotee is, one of the qualities of a devotee is doya, or a devotee is compassionate. And of course, as we've talked many, many times, that was exhibited to an extraordinary degree by Srila Prabhupada himself, by coming at such a late age from India to the West to start the Krishna consciousness movement. So, following in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, we should have compassion, and that compassion should be a broad-based compassion. Obviously, the ultimate compassion is to be able to give people Krishna consciousness and a solution to the problems that they face. But also we have to be compassionate, as Srila Prabhupada was himself. He signed off every letter that he wrote. Srila Prabhupada signed it off, your ever well-wisher. And I hope this meets you in good health was another phrase that he would use. So he had that broad concern. It wasn't just a narrow, one-focused concern. It was a very broad concern. So we also should be considerate to people. People are in a very uncertain time. I mean, the irony is all times are uncertain in the material world, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. But, you know, for them, it feels like a much more uncertain time. And as a result of that, it also creates or increases anxiety and stress and concern and all of those kind of things. So our compassion should be, because we all don't like that. None of us like to be anxious. None of us like to be fearful. None of us like to be suffering. That's something that we all want to avoid. So that compassion should be there. And of course we can help. We can also help in practical ways. Our restaurant in Abbey Street, you know, of course our whole movement, you know, and also our movement in Ireland, that's one of our activities that goes back ever since the beginning, was to distribute food to people, free food to people, prasadam, like that. And that has many positive effects. First and foremost, it's prasadam. It's none different than Krishna, so people are directly associating with Krishna. So that's of enormous benefit to them. But also in a relative sense, particularly in a situation that we find ourselves in now, people are greatly appreciative to see that we're making that effort and that endeavour to try to help in a difficult situation. And I think Amanda Vikram Prabhu put out a message on social media earlier in the week about us distributing prasadam, and it had tens of thousands of hits and lots of positive comments coming back like that. So that also then, which arguably is the most important point, if people are appreciating what you're doing, appreciating, liking, and seeing you as being really a positive contribution, making a positive contribution, then also they're going to be much more open to hearing what you have to say on these types of subject matters, and therefore we can also have the opportunity to present the philosophical understanding of these situations. So I'd like to move on to that. It is, just before I do, it is actually another thing that's actually quite interesting about this specific issue that we're facing right now. Some of the key information that the governments are giving as it relates to preventing the spread of this particular virus, as with all viruses actually, but certainly obviously this particular virus, one thing that they're telling us to do is wash our hands. You know, in fact, they're saying wash your hands multiple times, as many times as possible, and to do it with warm water soap and, you know, whatever it is, 20 seconds, etc., like that. But of course, as devotees, you know, being suchi meaning cleanliness, and of course we have that saying, cleanliness is next to godliness, that's something that, you know, should be a norm for human beings. We should always be striving to be suchi and clean, both externally, so in terms of showering and washing our hands like that, and also internally, meaning it's particularly as it relates to material desire and controlling our senses like that. So that's a norm. Now the governments are telling everybody that you know, you see it every shop you go into, everywhere you go, and we may not be able to go very far soon, but it's all about washing hands. So it's kind of interesting that's certainly something that we would support, and all devotees do it anyway. Another one is that you know, not shaking hands. Now there are examples actually of Krishna shaking hands with certain important personalities like Lord Brahma, but in general, of course, you know, devotees will offer pranams, which doesn't have that handshaking interaction. So again, it's kind of a natural thing for us, and helps with remaining clean and remaining suchi. Another one, which was I just heard recently, which I thought was really interesting, is they're advising people not to bring their shoes into their houses, because they might be carrying the virus and the germs on the soles of their shoes that they may have picked up somewhere else outside. So they're advising people not to bring their shoes inside. You know, but that's something I haven't done for, you know, 36, 37 years or whatever it is, because, you know, we never do that. We never bring our shoes inside our houses, inside a temple, etc., because it's unclean, because you are bringing the dirt from the streets, etc., like that. So I was just kind of quite interested to notice that so many of the advice that they're giving us in order to help with this problem that we have now is something that we really should be following naturally ourselves anyway. But most of all then is the counselling and the information that we can give from a philosophical perspective. Srila Prabhupada states many, many times that once we're born, we have to die. There is just no two ways about that. Once we're born and accept a material body, we have to die. And of course, worrying about death is only half of the equation, because we also should be worried about not taking birth again, because once we take birth again, then we obviously have to die again like that. So the whole idea is that we need to break this cycle of samsara, of birth and death like that. So it is interesting now that people are in increased anxiety, but coronavirus or not, we have to die. And it's interesting, since this thing first came to light, and I haven't checked this statistically, but you can be sure that it's fairly accurate, across the globe, across the planet, millions of people will have left their bodies. Millions of people will have left their bodies, or what we call death, have died. Totally unrelated to the coronavirus. It will have no connection. They will have died of car crashes, of old age, of cancer, whatever the illness or the situation may be. So death is inevitable. So logically, either we shouldn't have increased anxiety at a time like this, because death is always with us anyway, or we should always be anxious about it, even when we don't have an epidemic or a pandemic as we have now with the coronavirus. So that again is a message, I think, that people are much more open to now, because they do have this increased fear and this increased anxiety. This material world, as we've discussed many times, is known as Kanta, or the place of anxiety, and the spiritual world is known as Vaikuntha, where there is no anxiety. But at least now, because that anxiety is very strong, people are likely to be more open to hearing these kind of messages like that. So what is the solution to that anxiety? Whether you have it now or whether you have it all the time like that, what actually is the solution to that problem? And the solution is understanding the nature of the world that we're in. Today is a very nice, bright spring summer's day with the sun shining brightly. So essentially it's a very nice day, and that's what people will say, oh, it's a beautiful day, it's a very nice day like that. But it's still, the world that we're living in is still mrityu loka, or the world of death. And as Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, Aprama Bhuvana Loka, from the very highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of suffering and anxiety and stress and concern and fear. All are places of anxiety. And the reason that they're places of anxiety is because once in this world, the material world, from whether the highest planet or the lowest planet and everything in between, you have to experience death because you've taken birth. So the goal is not to wish for a beautiful day when the sun is shining, although that's fine too, it's nice to have that. But at least when that's there and present, we don't lose perspective of where we're actually dwelling, where we're living in at this very moment in time. The place we're living in is Mrityu Loka, or the place of death. So the solution is not to get rid of a coronavirus, or the solution is not to have nice sunny days, or the solution is not to have a nice, big bank balance, or a nice big house, or a nice, big family, or whatever the case may be. The solution is to not come to the material world. Or, if we have come, like we all have, we're all here now, that we are in the material world, the solution is to leave this material world and never come back again. Another interesting, we'll elaborate on that a little bit more now, but another interesting point that came to my mind is all the governments are coming together and they're rallying around and they're really getting into this, and it's a big kind of crisis for them. But one of the main reasons really for that is their lack of control of the situation, because they like to be in control, they like to feel they have control of situations. But there's also a positive to understanding that there's a lack of control, or understanding that we're not in control, because we're not. We ultimately are not in control. Even though some external circumstances, we can appear to be in more control of certain circumstances than other circumstances. So without this coronavirus, governments may have felt they're in more control of society and running things, etc. Now they feel that they're losing control because they have no vaccine for this, etc. But ultimately, we're not in control in the material world. We don't control time, and therefore we cannot control events. And we can see, ever since I was a little boy, when I first sort of became interested in the world as such, I remember the first kind of existential threat to human society was nuclear war. And at that time it was Russia and America, and the fear, there was a Cuba crisis and all this kind of stuff. And then different things. We had the whole experience of the IS and the terrorism and all that kind of thing. I remember Y2K 20 years ago. They were talking about computers all failing and things going wrong. We had the financial crash 10-12 years ago. But it's interesting, the material world, it's known as padam padam yad vipadam. There is danger at every step. So with this particular thing, this has caused more of a problem in society and for governments, etc., and for human beings. This has caused more of a problem than all of the other things put together that I just mentioned, but nobody saw it coming. 4 months ago, no one ever knew what a coronavirus was, practically speaking. No one ever knew, I don't think. I'd never heard of Hubei province in China, or Wuhan city. Never heard of them 4 months ago. Just short 4 months ago. Now, what's happened has created more of a problem for the world and global society than any other things that they've been thinking of for the previous decades upon decades like that. So yeah, the material world, it's an unstable place, it's an insecure place, it's kanta, it's a place of anxiety, and we can never change that. They will find, no doubt, I have no doubt, they will find a solution to this coronavirus, they will find a vaccine for it, etc. And, no doubt in a year, 2, 3 years' time, this will be history and it will be all sorted. But that won't change the intrinsic nature of the material world. Fear, anxiety, and all of these things will still be there. So it's really on that level that we need to be communicating to people. And also communicating so they understand this is not a negative thing. This is the most super positive and joyous thing that you can know, because this is how you can become truly liberated. Not just liberated in a relative sense, but liberated in an absolute sense by taking to the process of Krishna consciousness. And another thing that is really interesting also is, and of course I understand this, I'm actually at home right now. I was my last time I travelled was last week in the UK, in London. Actually, when I was coming back from London, I was on the last flight out of City Airport, and the previous flight, Aer Lingus CityJet flight, they cancelled it due to lack of demand, but they obviously put whoever was due to be on that flight onto my flight, onto the last flight. But even still, even though the last flight was a combination of two flights, there was only 9 people on it, just 9 people on it. But the interesting thing is, my experiences, and you hear and see and whatever, that during a crisis like this, everybody wants to get home, like myself. Everybody wants to be, because there's a sense of feeling safer at home. But again, from an absolute perspective, we have to think about and consider what's our real home, what's our true home. Is our true home Dublin or London or Calcutta or Buenos Aires, or Johannesburg or Sydney or wherever it may be? What's our true home? Because logically, if we're anxious and feel safer at home, then we'll feel even more safe in our true home or at our true home. So Krishna tells us very clearly that our true home is the spiritual world, it's not the material world. And whatever about the ups and downs that go on in this world, and that sometimes we're feeling maybe more peaceful than other times we're feeling more stressed, ultimately we will never be happy until we actually go, just like all the people trying to get home, until we go to our true home, which is there with Krishna in the spiritual world. And how do we do that? How do we achieve that? We have to, in a very systematic way and a very focused way, we have to extract ourselves from all things material and all things related to the material world. None more so than for all of us on an individual basis, the actual material body like that. And then when we do develop real detachment from the material world, from the material body that we're living in at the moment, we qualify ourselves to, when we leave these bodies, the spirit soul, we qualify ourselves, the spirit soul, to go back to the spiritual world, where then we are never born again. And because we're never born, we never have to die again. And this is the root cause. There are millions. The material world is just such an extraordinary place, because there are millions of different types of things that can cause us anxiety. But the actual root cause of the anxiety is the fear of death. Because one, we don't die, and it's so alien to us, the whole concept of dying is so alien to us, so that's one reason. And two, there's related to that is the fear of the unknown. We don't know, but we can become sure, we can know. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam. Krishna tells us that what you're thinking of and what we're remembering at the time of death, that is where we go. So if we're thinking of Krishna and thinking of Krishna's associates and thinking of Krishna's home, etc., the spiritual world at the time of death, that's where we will go. And then all our fear is gone, because we never have to take birth again and therefore never have to die like that. So yeah, this is a golden opportunity, wonderful opportunity, both for ourselves to be more reflective and to think more about our situations and to rededicate ourselves to the process of spiritual life and the process of Krishna consciousness, the process of service to Guru and Krishna. But also then an even bigger opportunity for us to help those people. Like I said at the beginning, we should manifest compassion. So compassion, a broad compassion, but ultimately that compassion, real compassion, it cannot be complete without being able to offer people the solution to their ultimate problem, regardless of whether this problem of coronavirus is solved or any other problem like that. The ultimate problem is them living and being in the material world. We have to show them how to get out of the material world and stay out of the material world. Okay, because I have no audience in front of me, it's very hard to know if anybody is is paying attention or listening or interested in what's been spoken. So maybe I'll stop there. Sarumi, I guess you can hear me, because I'm trusting that you're there. So maybe you can let me know. Although, of course, I did say about the other phone, and now I'm not seeing the other phone directly. I will have to... I tell you what, Sarumi, you check the phone and see if any messages have come in, and I will just quickly go and get that phone so as that I can then see them, and then if there are any questions or comments, we can continue. So just bear with me literally 2 minutes. Thank you. Hare Krishna, back again. Yeah, so I have the phone now. I'm not sure if I'm doing it right, Sarumi, but I don't think there was some backwards and forwards from a couple of devotees, but I don't think there's any particular question, etc. I don't think, unless there's something that I'm doing wrong. Yeah, so to all who are online, just to mention again, this is a new kind of experiment, so we're a little what's the word, a little unsure how it's all working, but as time passes, and they're telling us that this coronavirus thing may well last many months actually, so as time passes, I guess we'll become a little bit more expert in working this out and doing everything. I just heard the phone go ping there, so oops a daisy, we can have a quick look. Is that what's here? Oh no, someone's ringing on the phone. All right, can you talk? Somebody is asking about the connection between 5G and coronavirus and governments trying to control us. First of all, I'm not sure what you mean by 5G. Is that means the internet thing is that, you know, the broadband, that we 3G, 4G and 5G. I mean, you know, I don't know who asked that, and you may not so much appreciate the answer that I'm going to give, but really, you know, it's neither here nor there. In other words, we deal with, you know, we're devotees and we're trying to give Krishna to everybody and expand Krishna consciousness as per the instruction of Srila Prabhupada. We're just simply trying to follow in his footsteps, and in that sense we're very much standing on the shoulder of a giant in Srila Prabhupada. So what may or may not be going on and what governments may or may not be getting up to is kind of neither here nor there. it's peripheral to our mission, and it's peripheral to our lives, really, in many respects. And nowadays you just get conspiracy theories to absolutely everything. But I really don't want to talk about that. Obviously, like every human being, you have a brain and an intelligence, and you have a thought on these things. But really, I don't think it's really appropriate for us as devotees to bother with that. It doesn't really matter. We are where we are. The situation is what it is. And it's just an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity. I mean, if it is a conspiracy theory and governments are trying to control us, then you certainly could make the argument that they've kind of miscalculated, because it just gives an opportunity for people to broaden their minds and open their hearts and open their minds to spiritual solutions to material problems. I mean, that was Prabhupada again, something he often said, that we have the spiritual solutions to all these material problems. So whatever the motivation behind it, it's just now a golden opportunity for us. And the other thing, though, I should mention is that regardless of whether there's something underhand going on or whatever, regardless of that, Prabhupada told us that we always have to follow the law of the land. He stressed that very strongly. Not because he was any great fan of governments or the material world or all of that. He was obviously very critical of them in the context of them promoting sense gratification and basically misleading people as to how to be happy. So in that sense, he was very critical. But at the same time, he was very strong on the point that we should follow the law of the land. And in this particular scenario that we find ourselves in, you can argue that's even more important, because, like I said about the message that Alakananda, I just saw his name. Sorry, Amanda, I just saw that on the WhatsApp feed. You're still listed there as Alakananda. As Amanda Vikram Prabhu put out the message on the social media, we got such a positive reaction to that. So in the same way, if we're seen as being good citizens and following our civic duty, again, people will appreciate that, and they'll be more open to us being able to communicate these more important messages of spiritual life and Krishna consciousness to them. So a combination of those two things: we should follow the law of the land, and we should take this wonderful opportunity really wholeheartedly. We really should embrace it. I'm trying to think myself how to do that better. But we really should embrace it. And obviously a lot of the messaging that we're going to, or the way that we're going to convey our messages, is going to be through the internet, because of this whole social distancing thing, that we can't actually literally have our Sunday feasts anymore. But I think collectively, if we put our minds to it, we really can have a significant impact, because people are looking for solutions. That's the reality. People are looking for solutions, and people want to be happy. That the bind that they're in, generally speaking, is that, in order to really be happy and to really make progress in spiritual life, you do have to, as Prabhupada would say, I think Jesus Christ said it, a man cannot serve two masters. So the problem people find themselves in is, yes, they do want to be happy, and they want that. Everybody wants to be happy, and everybody, if they have a taste of spiritual happiness, Susukam Kartam Avyayam, it's joyfully performed, it's blissful. Once you get a taste of that and realize how wonderful it is, then it's something you won't want to let go. But right now, what they don't want to let go is that lower happiness, the happiness that comes from engaging and serving the senses like that. So when the concern and anxiety of what our real life situation, when people don't really understand that or see that or are aware of that, then they're not inclined to give up sense gratification at all. But now in this scenario, where they're really feeling vulnerable and nervous and anxious because this imminent threat is there that they could literally, we can die at any minute anyway, nothing has changed, but they're perceiving a change. They're perceiving that it's more dangerous now. It's not more dangerous now than it's ever been, but they're perceiving that. And because of their perception of that, I think you'll find that they will be more open to the idea of suspending their sense gratification. To some degree, they have to suspend it anyway because of the external circumstances, and therefore they'll be more inclined to hear the message that we have. But yeah, as far as conspiracy theories go, you know, who knows? Who knows? But there, I just heard the ping again. Now I have to find where the phone is. Krishna, sorry, I had the phone with me there a few seconds ago, and then somehow or another it has disappeared on me. Fantastic. Did I put it under there? No, I don't see it. Yes, I really. One thing is for sure. Oh, there it is it behind me? Yeah. I need to be more organised on these calls. Okay, this is something from Manu Prabhu, Haribol Manuji. Can't see you. It's kind of a funny. It's kind of a funny thing, you know. I'm just looking at the back of my phone basically, and I can see absolutely nothing, but everybody obviously can see me. Anyway, Haribol Manu. So Manu is saying, let's see what he's saying. Now I have to put my wife's code in. It was an interesting point you made also about meat eating as well as being the basis of the problem. This could be a good preaching point as well. Absolutely. Just to expand on that a little bit. There's also another question, but just to expand on that a little bit. Actually, I didn't say it in this manner. We had a private conversation about that. But I was mentioning the point about not taking our shoes off, not bringing our shoes in. We do that anyway. Washing our hands, being suchi, being clean. We do that anyway. Not shaking hands, we do that anyway. But the other thing is that as we understand it, and you know, all the conspiracy theorists out there may have a different view, I don't know, but as we understand it, this originated in some food market in Wuhan, in China, and it's what they call a live market. I think they call it a live market or a warm market, something like that, live, warm market. And basically it's where people go and there's all animals in little cages, whatever they are, and then you want one, you say, okay, I'll have that one, and then they actually kill the animal on the spot in front of you. Of course, you know, I'm wincing when I say that as if that's barbaric. It is barbaric, but of course people in restaurants here in Dublin do that. You know, they go to fish restaurants, lobster restaurants, and the lobster's in the tank, and they say, okay, we'll take that one. The chef or whatever takes the lobster out of the tank and drops it into a pot of boiling water, and you hear the lobster squealing to death. I mean, it is inconceivable, you know. All of these creatures are sentient beings, just like us. You know, if you pinch me, I feel pain. You know, it's just incredible that we can be so oblivious to the suffering of other sentient beings, even when they're being dropped in a pot of hot water and you hear them squealing to death. It's really horrible. So we're just everyone in the world. There's no monopoly on barbarism here. You know, pretty much right across the world, you know, there's barbaric practices taking place everywhere. So anyway, you pick the animal, the man would take it, would kill it there on the spot, and at least what I've read, and you know, I don't know if it's true, but you know, if it is, wow. But some people would even take that then there on the spot, and they would actually drink the blood of the animal while it's warm like that. So this is the environment where apparently this virus began and took hold like that. And it certainly wouldn't surprise me if that's true, if that's real, simply because it's so unclean. And when we're engaged in unclean activities, negative consequences will always follow. Always follow. Whether that's external lack of cleanliness or internal lack of cleanliness, negative consequences will follow as a result. So thank you, Manaparu, for reminding me of that. But yeah, that's apparently where... And by the way, the word virus, to my understanding, the word virus comes from the Latin, which basically means poison. Like it's a poison like that. Okay, that was Manu. Next one was, during this challenging time when people are scared for their own well-being and that of our loved ones, what message should we tell to ourselves and how do we conduct our daily life? Well, we should strive. Oh, nice question, and thank you for it. We should strive actually, because this is what we are. We're ambassadors for Srila Prabhupada, you know, just like we have our nice Indian ambassador here in Dublin at the minute, who is very supportive of us and supportive of what we do, gave a very nice talk at Ratha Yatra last year, etc. He's the ambassador, and he's representing India in general, and particularly the government of India. So they're expected to conduct themselves in a proper way. So we're ambassadors for Srila Prabhupada. All of us are ambassadors for Srila Prabhupada. So we should conduct ourselves in the best possible way that we can, and in a way that Srila Prabhupada would be proud of us. So specifically, as you're mentioning there, let me just get it back up. Specifically, as you're mentioning there, during these challenging times when people are scared, what message should we tell to ourselves, and how we should conduct our daily life? Well, of course, Prabhupada functioned on the basis of the principle of acharya, that we should practice what we preach. So in one sense, we shouldn't really tell anybody to do something, or we shouldn't advise them about this, that, or the other, if we're not also following that advice ourselves. So that would be the first thing that I would say, that whatever we're going to convey to people should be something that we're doing ourselves. But in a more broad sense is what I spoke about when I was speaking originally, and that is that people are scared, and them being scared and their fear is simultaneously justified and not justified. It's not justified in the sense that nothing has changed. Whoever these people are that are scared, the reason they're scared, as we understand it, and I think it's fairly obvious, the reason that they're scared is because of the threat of this coronavirus. And what is the threat of the coronavirus? In essence, the threat is that you will die. But of course, we're going to die anyway. We are going to die anyway. So therefore, why be more scared now? So, that's one thing, that they're scared. So how do we help them? We help them by trying to convey that message to them, for them to understand, one, that you're going to die anyway. So in that sense, there's no reason to be more scared. But if you take shelter of Krishna, if you take shelter of the very person who has created not just this world and not just the material world, but also the spiritual world, if we take shelter of that person, take shelter of our Father, then he will protect us. Krishna will protect us. Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita that his devotee will never be vanquished. Never be vanquished. No matter what the situation, his devotee will never be vanquished. And we have many examples from the Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., where devotees that were in incredibly vulnerable situations, like Prahlad Maharaj as an example, just extraordinarily vulnerable situation, but Krishna protected them. Always protect. Queen Kunti, the Pandavas, always protected by Krishna like that. So that's the solution to their fear. The solution to their fear is not that Donald Trump or Boris Johnson or whoever it might be stands up tomorrow and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've got great news for you. We have conquered the corona." They're already saying that. They're going to conquer how they think they're going to conquer these things. But anyway, they're already saying like that. But they stand up tomorrow and say, "We have conquered the coronavirus. It no longer exists." And then everybody jumps up with joy and says, "Oh, Jai." Well, they won't say Jai Hari Bol, but they'll jump up, "Wow, wonderful, great news, great news." They're in exactly the same situation. If it's not the coronavirus that's going to get them, it's walking out in front of a bus, it's getting mugged on O'Connell Street, it's developing some cancer or some other disease. That's your problem. Don't get distracted by thinking this is your only problem. No, what this is highlighting what your problem is anyway. And that really should be our entry point. That, yes, it's a threat, absolutely. But even if it's got rid of, you essentially are still in the same position. And then from that point, we can discuss other subjects with them. Okay. Let me check here again now. Unfortunately, this is my wife's phone, and she's also on the Govinda's chat group. And the Govinda's chat group have been pinging away while this has been going on, and I'm thinking more questions are coming in, but it's not. that was the Govinda chat group. Okay, so I think I should finish there. As I say, I think this was our first attempt at this. No doubt we will get better as the weeks and months go by. But for all of those who have been tuning in, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, let's unite during this time together as a sangha of devotees, and let's do whatever we can to help alleviate the stress and anxiety of people and the difficult situation they find themselves in. yeah, let's do that. And the best way, of course, we can do that is by giving them Krishna consciousness to the degree that they're willing to hear and accept it. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Oh, is that something? It's probably the Govinda's group again. Yeah, I think it's the Govinda's group again. So Jai, I'm going to have to do something about the phone actually next time as well. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.